In this third video in my mini-series on the world of Equestria, I would like to look at the government of Equestria. In my prior video, I said that Equestria seemed to be well developed. However, it has an absolute monarchy, and in today's world, absolute monarchies are viewed as an outdated, repressive form of government. So does this mean Equestria's government is outdated and antiquated? I don't necessarily think so. In fact, I think Equestria's government is modern and is a very effective, developed form of government for Equestria. I got to this conclusion by looking at what is the role of democracy, which is generally nowadays considered the best form of government, and then comparing it to what are ponies in Equestria looking for. Now I need to throw a few caveats out there. Obviously, this is over-analyzing it. The reason they have a monarchy is because little girls love princesses. Heck, Lorne wanted to make Celestia a queen, but was told, no, you gotta make her a princess. Queens are evil. So on the one hand, this is all just looking too deep into it, but I'd like trying to come up with solutions and answers that are within show. Now, more important than that, we don't know very much about Equestria's government. We've never had an episode that focused on it, and I don't think we're going to have an episode that focuses on it. We don't know if it's an absolute monarchy. We think it is, but for all we know, they have some sort of legislator. There are checks and balances on the princess's power. Maybe they have something comparable to the French estates. We don't know. But even assuming they don't, and it is an absolute monarchy, I still think it is a fairly developed form of government for Equestria. The reason for this ties into what is the function and purpose of a democracy. Now, obviously, this is going to be different for other people, and I'm merely espousing what my view of democracy is. But I think it's a pretty reasonable one. You, of course, are totally free to disagree with it. Nor is this an exhaustive list on what I think the role and purpose of a democracy is. I am just focusing here on the key aspect of it that relates to Equestria. So, first thing I want to say is I love democracy. Democracy, I think, is the best form of government by a mile. Nothing comes close. So, what is the function of a democracy? Well, at the simplest level, it's to express the will of the people. But that's not exactly a full definition. In almost every country, you have groups that disagree with one another. In these cases, whose will is represented? Many would argue the majority, but then does that mean they can just impose their will on the minority? That doesn't seem right, and that has in the past led to some quite bad results. On the flip side, it makes no sense for the minority to impose their will on the majority. So the function, the purpose of a democracy is to, while representing the interests of the majority, to protect the minority. That is the advantage of having all these balance of powers, or in a parliamentary system, having no party have complete control and having to be forming these coalitions. It has a moderating effect and makes it harder for the majority to just impose their will on the minority. This allows for the protection of individuals who disagree. Almost anyone would say, if they made me president, prime minister, chancellor, whatever, that I could get this country working right and I could make it all work and do well and get on the right track. But the issue is, they could get the country looking the way they wanted it, but others would disagree. The country I want is not necessarily the country you want, which isn't necessarily the country they over there want. Everyone has different views and ideas about what makes a country good, what needs to be done. This is where all these political debates and gridlock comes in. People have fundamentally different views about the direction the country should do and the policies it should enforce. While there may be some wrong answers, there are certainly no right answers to this, and intelligent people will disagree. This is the real function for a lot of the gridlock we see. There are very, shall we say, differing views on how we should conduct our countries, and there is not as much common ground as we would like there to be. And while it does mean less legislation is passed, it does protect people from the excesses of the majority. For example, if a liberal has power, the conservatives don't really want to have the liberals' ideas shoved down their throat, but conversely, when the liberals are out of power and the conservatives are in power, the liberals don't want the conservatives ramming their policies down the liberals' throats. Having a system that protects the minority, the party not in power, is the true brilliance and function of democracy. In my mind, this is what makes democracy so much better from every other government type. Sure, the individual politicians can be trying to screw one another and just accruing power, but ultimately, it protects dissenting viewpoints and it helps have a moderating impact and to more slowly shift the country and have it run for the betterment of all the people. Too often, dictatorships, monarchies, totalitarian governments ultimately serve a small group of people who agree with what the government is doing and oppress or dissatisfy the majority. So, how does this tie in then to Equestria? If you accept this definition of democracy, it boils down to, does Equestria have differing viewpoints, differences in ideas, differences in the direction ponies want the country to go? While we have never seen an episode that really focuses on this, that's not what the target audience for the show wants. They'd be bored to tears. And probably a lot of bronies would be bored as well. So we can't say for certainty that there aren't differences in political ideas. But from what we've seen, there aren't really, but there are differences in ideas and views. And this comes down, though, not to politics, not to economics, but to their tribe, what species they belong to. Pegasi are kind of a block. The unicorns are a block. Earth ponies are a block. And while this isn't necessarily true for every individual, on a whole, these birds of a feather seem to be flying together. A lot of towns still seem very segmented. It seems pretty clear from Hearthswarming Eve. If a unicorn took power, the Earth Ponies and Pegasi would probably not take too kindly to having the unicorn's beliefs shoved down their throat. And conversely, a Pegasi wouldn't fare much better trying to rule Earth Ponies and unicorns. Given that the tribes don't really want to work together too much, it's not even that it's distrust and hate, but they just don't trust them to represent them well. This is where the princesses come in. They are alicorn princesses. Unlike normal ponies, they can understand and can represent all of the tribes because they combine unicorn, Pegasi, and Earth Pony into one. They know what it's like to be a Pegasi. They know their fears, desires, wants, and they can adequately represent them. If Celestia were to say, we're going to do this, the Pegasi aren't going to feel like they're getting the unicorns or Earth Ponies' will shoved down their throat. The same holds true for the others. Because they combine all three tribes into one, the alicorns are in a unique position. They can figure out what species want, what Equestria needs, and figure out the right path for the whole of Equestria. Of course, it helps that they're good rulers. They're not in it for money. They're not in it for power or prestige. They're in it to make Equestria better. And while that is very helpful, it's more important that they can understand them all and represent them all. I'll also point out that there are still some checks and balances on the princess's power. There are the other princesses. If one were to go crazy, such as Luna, the others could step in and prevent her from taking power and hurting the land by not being a faithful representative. Also, one can argue that through such things such as discord being free, it forces the princesses to work together and to govern for the betterment of all of Equestria. Otherwise, discord could step in. So there are some checks and balances, but fundamentally it seems like an absolute monarchy. But it works for Equestria because they don't have political differences other than their tribe. The fact that the princesses can adequately represent them means you get the best parts of a democracy and monarchy without getting all the negative elements of it. So, is this an advanced form of government for Equestria? Yes. Is it a practical form of government for the real world? Can we learn anything from it? No. As long as there are differences in people's beliefs and opinions, which there probably always will be, this is never going to be an adequate or acceptable form of government. So I hope you found this video interesting. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay derpy, my friends.